say one of the things that was interesting was that because I got myself out of debt, my vendors started noticing, like, how did you get yourself out of debt? And I showed them, here's how I do my pricing now. And they're like, what? Nobody does that. And I'm like, I know, that's why I'm doing it. It's different, right? And so my vendors gave me leads to say, hey, I got these guys who are in debt. Could you help them in a way? So I knew about 1996 to 98, somewhere in that range, that this was going to be something I really loved doing. And I really enjoyed doing a turnaround, taking somebody who was struggling and making them profitable in a very fast fashion.
Welcome to the Lion's Den, hosted by Lance Bachman.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Lion's Den. This edition, the big cat's out of the office today, but Bill Russell here, Chief Sales Officer, One SEO. I want to tell everybody I am super excited to bring you this edition to the Den because I have one of the leaders in the home service space that's been doing this for quite some time. And I'm just going to many of you know when I say the word Uncle Joe, what that name means. But for those that don't, I'm going to do a quick intro to this legend in our space of service business coaching and consulting of Joe Crisara. He is America's service and sales coach, a worldwide service and sales educator and entrepreneur. Joe has that good feeling that he is a member of your family and someone that is passionate about the approach that he brings. Over 40 years of contractor experience with a strong expertise and performance, what he calls pure motivative service, and thus anticipating and hearing the thunderous ring from the truth. Joe, who stands apart from traditional coaching and training, helps contractors achieve revenues of 3 to 5 times the average person. So with that being said, Joe, welcome to the Den.
Hey, Bill, thanks for that's a really great intro. I'm not sure where you got that one from, but definitely, I'm not sure what kind of narcissist would write an intro like that, but thank you.
It came from Tommy.
Okay, it has to be a Tommy Mello factor, but good. Thank you. It's really nice to be here.
First of all, what I'd like to do is, thank you once again for being on the Den. We have obviously have a lot of mutual. This is our first time kind of really sitting down and just brainstorming and talking about different items of what's happening in our space, not just our space, the home service space, but service-based business space. I look at a digital agency like One SEO. It's a service-based business. I look at it as an attorney, a service-based business. I look at a plumbing, heating, air conditioner, painting, roofing, siding, service-based business, providing a service that somebody needs that they can't do on their own, and that somebody can provide that service for them. And one of the big things that I think that as you look into 2022, and what we've gone through in the last 18, 20 months, accountability really has to be, at the top of people's kind of game plan for what they're doing from a sales, service, opportunity side. And, like I said, we have a lot of colleagues in common: Tommy Mello, Dan Antonelli, Brad Case-Baird, Dave Geiger. I could probably go on with 100 other that 100 times better than I do, that have been in your circles for a while. And I've been waiting to get you on the podcast for quite some time. So what I'd like for you to do really is kind of give us, just give the audience an overall bio for those who don't know you and what Service MVP is all about, kind of how it came to fruition, where you started, and the traces from Illinois out to LA, and the course and the growth of your career. So if I could kind of just get that insight out of the gate, that would be great.
Sure, that'd be fantastic. Thanks. First of all, thank you for inviting me here again, and thanks for all of you for tuning in. I really appreciate that, taking your time to listen to me. Well, I started out in 1976, so 45 years ago, as a normal HVAC service technician, and by 1985, I got a bolt from the blue that I was a technician suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure, and I went into 1985. By about 7 years into it, I found the perfect system to drive the company about $250,000 in debt. And then I was going through a divorce. My first marriage fell apart, and my business was falling apart. And I was desperate enough to listen to one of my clients who was a pharmaceutical salesperson who said, Joe, why are you always trying to save people money on stuff? Why don't you try to show them the best service? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm just trying to save people money was my method. My method of success back then was find what my competition was charging and then charge just a little bit less. That was my brainstorm I had, which drove me 250,000 in debt. Eventually, through a bunch of series of unfortunate events, people not paying me, couple big contracts where I did all the work and didn't get paid anything. So I had a bunch of things where I was just weak, right? And they're all self-inflicted wounds. Everything was something I caused myself. Of course, I wasn't aware of that when I told my customer, yeah, the economy's bad. I got my ex-wife. I got these customers who didn't pay me. My employees are quitting. And he said, there's only one thing I noticed that you haven't mentioned that is responsible for all these things, Joe. And I said, well, what? My wife's mother? And he's like, no, it's you. You haven't taken responsibility yourself. And so he showed me the science of pricing, which is what I teach today. The guy's name was Dave Muller. He passed away in 2008. A great mentor of mine, just a friend. He never charged me anything. He just took pity on me. And this is back in 1991 when this all happened. And then, throughout the years, I learned how to the science of communication, the science of pricing, the science of really how you do everything in this business. And so everything I do is based by a study or fact. So there's nothing I do that I made myself. I'm not an inventor of the system. I am a facilitator that has learned the science of communication, the science of pricing, the science of connecting, and how do we manifest that into a value-based something where it creates high value, right? So that you're not giving parts and labor to your client. You're giving solutions that are an investment in their family, not an investment in their plumbing, HVAC, or if you're an attorney, it's not an investment in the lawyer, it's an investment in the family to make sure that we're going to do this in the best way possible, the highest quality way. And that's what I teach. I try to teach people how to elevate their standards, to take some of the best practice groups like Nexstar and some of the other best practice group out there, and try to put another layer on top of that cake. Right? Those are all great things that have been created. I remember I was at one of the first Nexstar meetings in 1992. It had George Brazil, Frank Blau was there, and all
Legends
kinds
in
of
the
people were there
space.
when I was. It was like the Mount Rushmore of contracting. I happened to be at that meeting. Now I was not smart enough to join back then, but I did eventually become part of it, in a different way. After I sold my business, the company that purchased me was a Nexstar client. I definitely got a lot of value from that. A lot of value from just my clients provide a lot of value, like Dave Geiger, and Brad and Sarah Casebeer when they started their business. That was with them when they started up originally. And so definitely a lot of who's who of contracting that I'm so proud to have as friends, and also as clients as well too. So, over the years, I've learned how to fail. My superpower is knowing how to fail spectacularly, and also how to fix that so doesn't happen again, or it doesn't happen to begin with for my new clients. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting is that how long did it take you to flip the 250 in debt once you started talking to Dave to the point where you sold the business?
Well, it was interesting. It was $250,000 in January of 2001. I'm sorry, 1991. And by December of 1994, I was debt free, and I was on my way to paying off everything. Every bill was now just a current bill. It wasn't a past due bill by December of 1994, because I was selling solutions that I currently was not offering at the time. I was not offering premium options. I was offering ways to save people money, to be it cheaper in a way. My only thing I thought was that people were motivated to get a lower price, and that's what I thought. It was an erroneous thought on my part. But I thought at the time that the only way to sell something is be less money than somebody else. I didn't realize that you could create higher value, and that's what I did for those 3 years. the very first call we did, where we created, Dave taught me the science of pricing, which is how to create premium, mid-range, and economy prices. The first time I did it, I took a call that I would have made $125, and we made $1,250, literally 10 times more on that first call. And the first week we did like $14,000 using that method, and I normally would have done about $2,000 on that method. So definitely with my previous method. So I just kept adding on to that intelligence of how to make, not just how to make those options premium, mid-range, economy, but also how to personalize them and customize them so they're relevant to people. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that one of the things is that when you get to that point where you kind of understand that, things are churning in the right way and the train's moving, and it becomes infectious across, it comes across the board. You're growing the business from 94 to 2006. 2006, you make the decision to say, I'm going to sell.
It was 2001.
2001, I apologize. 2001. When you made that decision and you went through with the whole transaction process, did you say, what am I going to do now?
No, actually,
Did you already have it in mind what you were going to do?
one of the things that was interesting was that because I got myself out of debt, my vendors started noticing, like, how did you get yourself out of debt? And I showed them, here's how I do my pricing now. And they're like, what? Nobody does that. And I'm like, I know, that's why I'm doing it. It's different, right? And so my vendors gave me leads to say, hey, I got these guys who are in debt. Could you help them in a way? So I knew about 1996 to 98, somewhere in that range, that this was going to be something I really loved doing. And I really enjoyed doing a turnaround, taking somebody who was struggling and making them profitable in a very fast fashion. And like you said, the second you become profitable, I say premium service is like the knife that cuts through the fog of uncertainty when it comes to business. When you know how to offer premium service, it cuts through the fog of uncertainty, and all of a sudden the light clears and you can see the end of the rainbow, and you're like, holy crap, it's right in front of me. And like, there wasn't a day after I first learned what to do, when Dave told me what to do, the first time he told me how to do my pricing and how to change the pricing. After that first call, there wasn't one call that I wasn't more successful at than the previous way I've ever been. So it was amazing. Literally, it was 5 to 10 times more service I was selling, simply because I learned how to offer that service, when before I was previously afraid to offer it because I thought people would not respect the price being higher. That's what I thought.
If you like this content and you're trying to grow your business, follow me at Lance Bachman and Lance Bachman Digital on Facebook. LFG, time to grow.
It's interesting. We were kind of talking earlier. I think that there are three things that you can either be. You can either have the best quality, you can be either cheaper, or you can be faster, but you can't be all three. And I think a lot of times that people, at least in the sales world from this end, they sometimes will pitch with their own pocketbook versus pitching with what the value of having that high quality AC unit and what that value will bring to that person over the period of time. It's so interesting to me that that was a struggle point for you, that now you train differently on how to get people to overcome that. Oh my gosh, I'm going to ask somebody to help their business go from 5.2 million to 7.1 million. You're going to have a marketing allocation of 8 to 10% in order to achieve that. I always say, listen, if you don't have enough gas in the car and you try to drive from LA to San Diego and don't have 400 miles in your tank, you're going to be sitting on the side of probably the 405 or whatever interstate it is that you're going to be taking from San Diego or from LA to San Diego. All right, before we always get into the nuts and bolts in the den, I always like to throw rapid fire questions at my guests here, just completely off the wall. So the first one I want to throw at you: if you didn't get into the home services business, what job would you have done outside of the home service space?
Well, I used to be a musician, so I used to play in the music business. I was a lead singer and a bass player in a band for like 15 years. So I probably would have stuck with that. If I had my dream, I probably would be doing something in the music industry. I used to love that. Of course, the music industry faded away, so the home service business is far more stable, and I definitely don't regret the path I took. But definitely, if I had to do something else, probably would be entertainment or the music industry.
I heard on and one of my colleagues spending some time with you, they asked you what your walk up tune would be, and you had said something by the Foo Fighters, and they were both Paul and Chris were blown away by that. Your choice was the Foo Fighters, so I found that interesting. Okay, so on a deserted island, you get one record or album, okay, and one DVD movie. What are they going to be?
Well, I'd probably say for the DVD movie, I would say Forrest Gump.
Okay.
But I would also say for the CD, that's a tough one on the CD. It'd either be Queen's Night at the Opera
Okay.
or the Foo Fighters Walk, that album with was it Daylight? I forget what it's called. I forget the name of the album, but definitely every song on it. I love the Foo Fighters. It's really great. So
If you get a chance, go watch the Foo Fighters 2008 Wembley show. At the very end of the show, they bring Jimmy Page on, and Dave Grohl goes and plays drum, and Tyler comes out and sings Zeppelin with Jimmy Page playing.
nice.
Worth the 10 minutes. All right. If you were to drink bourbon, would it be neat or on the rocks?
I like enjoying the rocks with a cigar.
All right. Specific. What's the recommendation on the cigar that you're going to make to the audience?
I don't have that. I always leave it to the people who provide the cigars to guide me that direction. I'm not that into it, but definitely I do know bourbon in a cigar gives you a special glow that you can't get anywhere else.
No doubt. If you could have dinner with anybody dead or alive, who would it be?
Well, that's a good one. Good question. I probably would say dead or alive. I'd probably say Michael Jordan. I would love to pick his brain just to spend time with him. That could be very cool.
Or does that mean you're a Bulls fan?
Well, I am from the I am in the 1990s and all the way back to the 1970s too. But I gave it a break for a while, and now I'm back.
Well, you're kind of like him. You took 3 years off to go try something crazy, and now you're back. All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of the den today. And I know first and foremost, you're coming off a pretty big event in September, and True Grit. And I was hoping you could first and foremost talk a little bit about the event. First year doing it, second year, third year, and what does the evolution of True Grit kind of look like? Because from everything that either Dan or Tommy told me, it really was an incredible event that a lot of people benefited from. So as well, hopefully you can tell us a little bit about what True Grit was all about, and where do you see the evolution of it going?
Well, this is the third time we've had an event like this. And one of the things that I try to make sure actually, before we have an event like this, I always try to make sure it's something kind of like what you're doing right now. You find people that you find very interesting who are connected with people who are very successful, and then you try to give them a voice, right? It happened to be like Dan Antonelli is like the very first thing I would tell any business to do is get his branding down. Because once you got people are sold before you walk in the door, then we can help you get sold after you're in the door, right? And guys like Tommy Mello, Ishmael, who grew his business from 0 to 30 million in less than 5 years. Really every single person in that event was somebody who grinded it out, who didn't have a lot of capital, but they did have a lot of energy and weren't afraid of hard work to put in some of the best practices that they learned. One of the biggest things I've found is that the people who are the most successful are bold implementers who decisively move forward. Whether it's right or wrong, they'll spend the money and and throw the money at it to get it done. And then they'll challenge their service providers to make sure they provide great service. Rather than being afraid of spending money, they are boldly investing in their companies. and have no doubt about it. They're like, I'm going to spend more and then challenge the service provider to do their job. And I think that's really what I noticed about guys like Travis Smith, from Sky Services, Ishmael, just really everybody who's very successful nowadays is a rapid implementer of new ideas, and they're using proven methods, but they do it quickly. They don't, there's not like a democracy in these businesses. It's like one person saying, we're moving forward and we're doing it. The companies that are the old school companies where they got to run it past my dad, I got to talk to my mom, I got to talk to my wife. Those are the businesses that's usually suffer the most because there's not one person at the helm who can make decisions quickly. That's really what I found.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, obviously I've been following your content for quite some time, and it amazes me that, you've gained the respect of both the old school, the Dave Geigers, the Joe Olivers. You can go across the board, the Fred Hutchinsons of the world. However, you also have that respect in what you guys do at Service MVP, as far as in Tommy and Ishmael and a new school, as I like to call it, home service, providers that are cutting edge. They're focusing on technology. How do they get to that next level? And they've grown their business huge in that 3 to 5 year span. And I just think it's a tribute to the method that you bring to the table, that they're willing to invest. And, it's funny is that, when the pandemic kind of first started, and that's how really the whole Lions Den came about was, look, nobody knows what to do when you're in shutdown or how to operate it. And it's funny, we were talking to Brad Casebeer, and he said, listen, we've been saving for a rainy day for a long time. And that rainy day is upon us. And either one of two things is going to happen. Either people are going to take a step back and their business is going to fail, or they're going to be like me, who's going to dive all in at this point. And he dove all in and went from 30 to 55 million in the period of 2 years. And he wasn't afraid to say, scared money doesn't make any money, according to Meek Mill. But the fact of the matter is he wasn't afraid to dive in and say, let's take our business to the next level. And I think that's where a lot of these businesses that either fail or they've succeeded over the course of time have said that where they're going to go. But
let me just comment on that a little bit. There's there's an old school, the old school professionals, the guys who laid down the groundwork. All the new school people have done was learn from that and rapidly implement what they know works. There's two groups of old school people, though. There's some old school people who are like greatly admiring the new energy of the new school, and they're rallying behind those people. And then there's old school contractors who are resistant to the new people, who are acting like, oh, there's no way you could be that successful that quickly. It's impossible. And the reason they think it's impossible because they haven't done it themselves, right? So there's a lot of mixed bag there. There's some people who greatly admire the energy and the intelligence and the innovation of the new people, the newer contractors who are very, very successful. The last True Grit we did 2 years ago, right before the pandemic, we had 7 guys in the room who were under 40 years old who had all reached $30 million in less than 7 years. It's crazy. Now, there was a lot of older people who were like, that's nuts. There's no way you can sustain that. That's a mirage. They must have investors. They must have all that. The truth was they were just solid businesses that took the methods from the old school people, guys like Dave and Brad and guys like that, and they rapidly implemented what they knew it worked. They had no resistance with their organization because they had full control of the organization. So the people who are not successful are the ones who have to run it past a committee. They've got to get more advice from somebody else. We have to think about it. Dude, if you see somebody who's successful and you got methods that are successful, you put them in place as fast as possible, and then you make your adjustments from there. You don't, taking action is the first step of success. having meetings, if you're having too many meetings, you're in a bad place. That's not a place to succeed. Nobody ever said because we had that meeting we did great, but everybody says because we put that new script in place or we took that training from Joe Crisara, then all of a sudden we became successful. That's what makes people successful, is taking action and then making their adjustments from there. Waiting and having meetings just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, it's having all of those things kind of wrapped up as far as taking action kind of goes to where I want a majority of the conversation to go, is about having action is one thing, but you need to have accountability to those actions or you'll never be able to go. And one of the big things that we've been focusing on here at One SEO has been accountability across the board with our teams. I was hoping you could discuss a little bit of something that I've heard you say in the past, which is HLA, high level accountability, because it doesn't matter whether you're an HVAC, plumbing company, painting, roofing, digital marketing, it needs to happen. And I was wondering if you could give the audience a little bit about your thoughts on HLA.
Yeah, well, HLA is high leverage accountability that a company systematically puts into place. It's not something that you personally do to somebody. It's something that the machine that you built automatically holds people accountable. If you go to a ball game, there's accountability. You have to have a ticket to enter the ball game. If you don't have a ticket, then stay outside. It's like that. Now, same thing is true with heating and cooling and plumbing and every business. If you give somebody a script to answer the phone, they are following the script. But if somebody hears that person is not anymore, they have permission to tell that person, hey, let's go in the conference room and practice it again before you go back on the phone. In other words, before you give me that ticket to get back into the ballpark, you have to go outside the ballpark to do some batting practice first before you go back in. So accountability is usually something that's just a celebration when people do well. When it's all going good, then we just give recognition for all the accountability that people have achieved. But when it's not going good, it's stopping people, making them do some batting practice in a way, and then go back in the game. We're not just going to let you go back in the game when you're not doing it right. It's not a good service for a company. So here's what I could say, Bill. We all know what good external service looks like. Smile, put your booties on, be personable, make a friend with your client. But what about the internal service? The internal service, the number one service that every company must provide is systematic accountability. You give somebody something to do. If they don't do it correctly, you stop them as a service and ask them to practice again to prove that you're on track, and then go back and work again. Because you're not just going to go back to work if you did it wrong. If you did it wrong, you got to correct it and show me you got it before you go back into the business again. Make sense? So the worst part of most contracting businesses or any kind of service business, somebody makes a mistake, they just yell at the person and tell them to get back on track, and then they think they got it. And that's not good enough. It's not something you can personally run around doing. It would take too much energy to run around keeping everybody accountable. But let's say that you gave an installer an installation to do,
Yep.
And accountability would be take a video of the installation. I want to see the line set, outside unit, the inside unit. I want to see the gauges, the pressure readings on the gauges with a video of the gust gauges. And you want to see everything. And if that is not provided, then you don't get an install tomorrow. You have to go back and get what we should have done today before you start your job tomorrow. And that only happens like once or twice. Like, well, that's going to stop the whole business. Well, it's not going to stop the whole business if everybody realizes that they're going to stop you. Then they're going to make sure they double check and are very thorough before they go on to their next activity. Make sense? So in a way, it's letting people know that systematically you will be stopped. If you're driving too fast in traffic, you get those lights go on behind you, and you got accountability. And we all get that adrenaline rush, like, holy crap, I was speeding. Oh shoot! Hope the ticket. Oh shoot, he's pulling over. I'm going to get a ticket. And it's just like all the first we're in denial. I wasn't going that fast. I wasn't doing it that wrong. and the police officer doesn't care. He's like, dude, you're going to get a ticket. And that's all there is to it. Right now, that's accountability. Accountability is a service. You realize police officers are giving us a service to save our life, to save ourselves against our own life. Because if everybody just drove the way they wanted to drive, this place would be chaos out there. We'd be able to, nobody would drive with the lines. Everybody would just disrespect traffic. So accountability is something that you can see. Systematic accountability does work in many different, organizations, whether it's fire prevention or police or law enforcement or the military, it works, and it's systematically you can brought to your company. You got to think about how can we eliminate the possibility of doing something wrong. So the only way left is to do it right, so you can continue your job. The continuing your job is not a given. You got to earn the right to continue your job by doing the last job right, answering that phone, doing that service call, doing your accounting properly. If it's not right, stop and do it right before we continue on to the next activity.
So what's interesting is the digital marketer in me comes out when you talk about the guy being held accountable to the video of doing the job the right way. You now can take that piece of really, when the guy did the job the right way, you could take that, put it on your Facebook, put it on your Instagram, put it on your LinkedIn, and say, proper way from John Smith to install. So then now he gets rewarded by the ping, 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 because he just felt the dopamine go off of doing the job the right way. He'd want to have more of that. And so
train your competition that way. But here's what I can tell you. On a sales call, it would be cool to say, hey, why don't you watch this video of one of our installers doing, here's a before and after video while you're on a service call or a sales call. It's a great thing to do, because it becomes a marketing collateral that you definitely wouldn't have before that, for sure.
I have a very good friend, his name's Pat Eastburn, and he often says that which is done is measured. And from the sales side of digital marketing, that comes into play. I'm curious to think about how, from the home service space, how do you go about measuring those things that are done well and measuring them without it coming across the wrong way? Is it a situation where you measure it to show the accountability, or is it a measurement to show where the progress is in the organization? And hopefully you could talk a little bit about that.
It's actually, I could get some really good advice for everybody. Don't worry about, people put the KPIs out there, and all those KPIs are usually result based, right? You shouldn't be trying to measure the results. I mean, you need to have the results. I mean, it's obvious. We should have a scoreboard to see if our team won. But if you were trying to train the left tackle on a football team how to do great, you wouldn't say, let's look at the score of last week's game. We lost 42-7. Now go ahead and fix that. You wouldn't tell the left tackle to fix the scoreboard, because it's like, what can I do? Right. So specifically, what you need to pay attention to is the KPI on the effort that people make. So if you're training people how to do 2 premium, 2 mid-range, 2 economy options, and my training, 6 options is perfect. 2 premium to choose from, 2 mid-range, and 2 economy. And every single call you do would have 6 options. So and that's all effort. That doesn't take skill. That takes effort to make those options. So if you look at how many estimates per call or how many options per call, now you got an indication of the effort that people are making, right? You're not worrying about, you realize that if we keep making options and we keep showing them to customers, we will have a good score. The score will be good. But too many people obsess on the results, and that's like going to a football game and telling the crowd that we need a new scoreboard operator to win the game. The scoreboard operator ain't going to win the game. It's what's happening on the effort on the field of play. So, in baseball, they've done a lot with that, like spin rate. That's the effort it takes to spin the baseball. That's how you know you're going to be a good pitcher. Because then you can look at the amount of times you're throwing strikes, what the spin rate is. These are inside statistics that tell you it's like the effort that's being made that's going to prove out to be successful. So what I would base it on is the effort that people make. How many options do they make? Are those options personalized? Do I see the top option with the customer's name in it, right? Is every call being brought to a conclusion? Yes, no, or another appointment. Those are the three outcomes of every call. There is no other outcome. If somebody says we're waiting for a phone call, I'd say go back and make an appointment. And if the customer said I don't want to make an appointment, then I'd say then let me withdraw my bid, because it's bad service to leave customers behind. So either we need to tell me no so we can get on with this and not have to worry about it anymore, or let's make an appointment, because anything else puts too big of a burden onto the team because we didn't do our job right. So making the options, making them personal, bringing it to a conclusion, that's a service you're giving to the customer that's based on effort, not based on skill, or not based on like luck, or based on like, oh my God, I got a good call. Dude, everything is a good call when you do your job right. Like Tom Brady, when he's playing his game right, every game is a great game, right? He doesn't care who the competition is. Bill Belichick doesn't care who the competition is. It's like, we're going to play our game. We're going to make them respond to us. And if we play our game right, we're not worried about anything. Because we're going to make the effort that we're going to make. And if we're not good enough after we make that effort, then we got to go back and work on how to get better skill with that effort in a way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's funny. Now I'm going to shift gears here in my conversation a little bit, because, one of the questions that I really had is Nick Saban. And I'm a huge fan. He grew up, not too far from me in Pittsburgh and rural West Virginia, and arguably become one of the best coaches in the history of NCAAs. And you're talking about Belichick and Brady and all GOATs, and one of the things he says about the players at Alabama is that he says high performing achievers don't like low performing achievers, and low performing achievers don't like high performing achievers. And that's the Alabama culture. And whether you like it or you don't like it, that's the culture that he breeds. Do you think that kind of culture can work in a service-based business?
Well, let's put it this way. I believe that if we see dysfunction on our team, we have to have the courage to confront dysfunction. Now, whether it means that we don't like something or not, well, if I'm successful, I don't like when I see my teammates not being successful. So the question is, what makes a pure motive service provider? Somebody who doesn't like what they're seeing, but has the courage to step in as a good teammate and help coach that person to be successful. So if you don't like something, either change it or change your involvement in it. You can't coddle dysfunction. The companies that are successful, they don't coddle dysfunction. They help as a service to get people back to the behavior that's needed to get back on track. So if you don't like something, that's dysfunctional, just not liking it. Doing something to coach your teammate to get better, that's what's functional. So noticing when somebody's doing something wrong, and this means anybody, not management. It means that if you're a linebacker on a football team and you see the your defensive lineman is not lined up in the right gap, you'd slap him on the rear end and say, get in that gap, dude, you're in the wrong gap. And you would tell him, you'd help your teammate so he can be successful. So if the great teams like Alabama and the New England Patriots and people like that, they can anticipate the next play, and they're already kind of planning for the next play so that dysfunction doesn't happen again. One play where they got a 15-yard run on us, but that's going to stop on the next play because our guy was in the wrong gap, and that's what it was. So, it's teammates coaching each other, because the owner of a company cannot coach all the people in the company. The scalability of coaching is about 1 to 5, about one person to every 5, one coach for every 5 people on a team. That's about all you can do to have personal coaching experience with somebody. If you start getting to one service manager that was coaching 25 people, I'll guarantee you that will be a team in chaos. It won't be a team under control.
Well, it's interesting. I always say that Jesus had 12 disciples, and that we're working under him. If I have 6 and I'm doing a halfway good job with 6, that's probably the best that I can do. One of my good close colleagues, Keith Mercurio.
All it took was one bad disciple to plant
Exactly. My good colleague and friend, Keith Mercurio, often is, when he's speaking about leadership, he says, you got to be vulnerable as a leader. And it's kind of paralleled with something that I just was hearing you say. And I'd like to hear about your thoughts and about being vulnerable as a leader, because most organizations promote within. They say, hey, this guy did a really good job on sales and service. Let's make him our sales manager because he's really good at selling sales, but he hasn't gotten that leadership and people skill set because he's always been really great at being a really good skilled technician. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts as far as focusing on leadership and those companies that are doing a great job at growth, how they get their people to be able to be vulnerable as well as holding them accountable at the same time.
Well, it always starts at the top, right? So there's no such thing as a bad technician. There's only bad dispatchers who keep giving somebody a call when they haven't done it right. And there's no such thing as bad dispatchers. There's only bad managers who keep leaving the dispatcher give the guy the call. And there's no such thing as bad managers. There's only bad owners who let the manager continue to run the whole damn thing the wrong way. So it always starts at the top, that if you want something to change, the first person who has to change is the leader. The leader has to go, just by the nature of the word lead, you have to go first. So if something's going wrong in the organization, don't point a finger out at somebody else. Point, your finger back at you and say, this is my fault. We either haven't done the training effectively, we haven't done the coaching to keep people on track effectively, we haven't created a system of accountability, that's on me, and we haven't followed through to celebrate when things went good or to correct when things are not going good. So this is all part of leadership. So the owner of the company, no matter who it is, even if it's a board of directors, they should all take responsibility that this is their fault, because they haven't either provided the training, the necessary coaching, or the necessary accountability to make this work. If that hasn't been provided, one of those 3 things are missing, and then the company will be. It's actually very simple, right? Has my team been oriented and trained? Did I take the time to do that? Did they? And training means to graduate, to prove that they know what they're doing. Number 2, did I coach them when they got off track? Was there a systematic way of getting people back on track where I stopped them and got them back on track? And number 3, was I doing accountability? Did I celebrate when things went well? And did I correct and coach when things were falling short? This is the leader's responsibility. There is no such thing as a bad team. Because, there was a bum, I don't know if you remember Bum Phillips, who was the coach of the Houston Oilers.
Yes.
Formerly the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans used to be the old team that they used to be. But Bum Phillips said this to me, Bill. He said, not to me, but he said it in the general public. He said, Don Shula, who was one of the best coaches in football history, he would take your team and beat your ass, and he would take his team and beat your ass. That's how good the coach he was, right? So you know you're going against a great coach when you don't have a chance, because that coach is functionally operating from a different level than any other coach would do, right? So it's easy to see when you get a good coach. A good coach means that the team is on a winning streak. And even when we lose, we just ran out of time. It wasn't that we got beat because of effort or because we didn't do the job right. The other team just played better that day. And some days we lose like that. But it's not because we were dominated and we didn't know our assignments and we were in the wrong place or we didn't fumble. It wasn't a self-inflicted wound. Sometimes another team just beats you. But I tell you what, for every game you lose in football because the other team was better, you lose 10 games because you fumbled or threw an interception or were in the wrong place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I spent, I don't know if you're aware, but I spent almost 6 years in the Navy. on board nuclear powered submarines. And, it's interesting. You talk about the training aspect. One of the things that, and it's truly, I think, very, very transcending to what the military does, to what I think organizations should do. I have to be trained on this microphone. Okay. I have to be able to showcase the microphone, what goes into the microphone, and demonstrate the properties of the microphone. Okay. And I have to be signed off by a senior personnel that I'm able to talk about this microphone. And then once I get signed off on this microphone, I now go to this computer and I do the same exact, and they sign off. They literally sign off on every system that you're on board. And once you get through getting trained on every individual system, they then test you across the board on every system. And you go through 3 different people. But the celebration, and I mean celebration, Joe, that goes into when you earn that warfare insignia is incredible. You feel like you've never felt before because you put the effort into understanding all of those different systems. You've been tested to it. You've been understanding of what needs to be transpired, and you've been held accountable to understanding that information from the military. Can that process work in a service-based business to have that type of good accountability to the different systems that are in play?
It's the only way to sustain growth. Growth is not sustainable when you base it on dysfunction. What's functional? Learning something and then testing people to make sure they got it and graduating them, right? So the graduation is the biggest piece that most people miss. They have a meeting every week with their team, but there's no test to graduate people to make sure they learned what you taught them. So we teach people some training every single week in a meeting. I would say don't have a meeting unless you have a test or a way to show me that you now have comprehended what we met about today. So don't just give people a policy, give them a test on the policy. So they have to make an effort to pass the test. If I was going to start a new air conditioning guy, I would make sure you can charge, let's do a job test before you get hired. So you said you got 10 years of experience. Let's go charge an air conditioning unit. I'm going to take all the Freon out of my unit in the back here, and I'm going to have you charge it up again to make sure you know what you're doing. I'm not going to give you my keys to my truck unless I see that you passed the test. I don't care if you've been doing this 20 years or not. You got to do it the right way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I travel to clients all over the country. And, what amazes me is when I go into a really well-run unit, you would think that some of these companies that are doing 40, 50 million, it seems like, and the perfect example is when I went and visited Brad and Sarah at Radiant. Like, their phones are like ringing off the hook, and it's almost like it's kind of like a symphony in a lot of ways. Like, you're hearing it all, but nothing's crazy. Okay, it's in control chaos. And I guess the question is that an aspect of the system or the people, or both?
Well, I think the people become one unit, or you want to call it a culture, based on the destination that the leader has set. So I think it is a combination of both things, because you can't run a system with bad people or people who are not compliant, right? So it does take 2 people, but you can't manage people. You got to manage the system. If the system is working, then get people to follow the system. People who are compliant to following a system will make your team win. People who are spending time trying to figure out a different way to do something beside the way you're trying to train them, somebody who's trying to figure out a shortcut on a submarine will wind up sinking the submarine. That's all I can tell you. So it's not that people are bad, but sometimes innovation is misplaced. So any new innovation has to be prototyped to make sure that it's going to work before we implement the new method, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to and I love listening to podcasts of, just people in general that are in this space. And, I heard Ken Goodrich, and he was just discussing, and I know you probably have known Ken for a number of years. I know him 1,000 times better than me just hearing him on a podcast, but he discussed the importance of when buying organizations, and I heard him say you got to have a system for just about everything. He has a system to turning on the lights. He has a system to making the coffee in the morning, not just how to run an HVAC service call. And I'm curious, how much is system implementation in your training and what you teach the HVAC space as far as, being there doing it? Because our founder and Lance, he often says, we can have a system, but if you don't inspect what you expect, then the system is due to fail, no matter
Right.
how good it is.
Here at Service MVP, we are that system, right? So we bring operating system to companies that work. So it's plug and play. We do the orientation and onboarding of every new employee in a company. We make them graduate, give them a video, make sure they got a perfect pricing sheet. And then we do the orientation and graduation. Then we do weekly training to make sure that people are on track and to coach them to do batting practice every week to make sure that they know what they're doing. And then we also do a thing called eye care, which is every single day we're there to help people when they feel they're lost, to get them back onto the highway so they can know how they're trying to travel there. So our service is the only done for you service. You can do our stuff yourself if you're a strong enough company, but you're going to see accountability in action in our service. Our service that we provide is accountability. Accountability is our superpower. So if you want to see accountability for a week, just join us for a week and you'll see what it looks like when your company is being held accountable, both to celebrate the things, the effort they made to do the job right, and to get them back on track when they're not doing the job right. So we never look at it like it's a negative. It's always positive, because coaching is something to get people on track. That's a coach's job, to inspect what's going on and to act to be able to get people back on the main highway again, right? So a lot of people look at accountability as negative, but it's the number one service that every company has to learn how to do with their team. Because if you don't have accountability, both celebration and get back on track, then it's chaos. There could be a lot of things that happen wrong, but every time something happens wrong, you should be able to create a new system to fix that problem permanently. And that's what my superpower is. What I do, I teach people how to take problems and turn them into opportunities to solve systematic solutions to make sure they are fixed. Like a dirty truck, we'd make sure that everybody comes in and they do a truck inspection, and you take a picture of your truck and you send it to your dispatcher to make sure it looks like you do a video of yourself in front of your truck and let them know today's date, my name, here's the back of my truck, here's the front of my truck, I'm ready for my first call. That's accountability wired into an organization. That's got to be done that way. If you don't do it that way, you're going to have a bunch of trashed trucks is all you're going to have. Make sense?
Absolutely. We've been going at it almost for the quick as an hour, which first and foremost, I really appreciate your time. How can people how can they get a hold of Service MVP and Joe Crisara?
Well, you can just go to servicemvp.com, or, I'm on Facebook, go to the Service MVP members page, and we definitely will accept you in that, and we give you a lot of free material there. Our method of marketing, Bill, is to help people for free, believe it or not, so that they can become somewhat successful. And then when they see what we do as successful, then we sell them our services. So we only sell people our service if they've already succeeded to a degree with it before they paid us. So I want to make sure that for every single day that somebody joins us, they feel they've gotten more from us than they've already paid. That every single day in the life of our customer, whether it's Brad, Dave, all these people who work with us, the John Wayne people over in San Antonio, Texas, people like that, they feel like they've gotten more than they paid every single time they pay us. Make sense? So we will not accept your investment unless we see that you're going to be a good prototype to be successful. We inspect to make sure that you're willing to make the effort and time to be able to be successful before we take you on as a client. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Is True Grit already been scheduled for 2022?
It is coming in March. We're gonna announce it in the next week or two. It's gonna be an interactive role play event. We're gonna do the first ever escape room for customer service. So we're gonna have different escape rooms that you have to be able to learn the lesson, and you can't get out of the room until you role play and show us you got the lesson. We're gonna show you. You want to see accountability? Come to True Grit 2022, and you will see your team being accountable and what it looks like when somebody else is holding your team accountable. We have 20 different escape rooms from different customer service vignettes. You have to learn how to handle a customer concern. You aren't able to escape the room until you do it the right way. And that's what this event's going to be about. It's not going to be a speaker-based event. It's going to be the contractor is the star as they get through their escape rooms experience. What do you think of that?
I think that's it's a definitely it not only does it breed an understanding of where you're going well and where you're not going well, but it's a competitive aspect, because nobody wants to be locked in the escape room. There's a sense of failure if you've ever done one. We have something we call here in the Lion's Den the final roar. So here's what I'd like to know from you, Joe, if you can talk on the final roar, is if you could tell the service-based business it's struggling to hold accountability in an organization, how it would impact their business and their culture, what would that final roar be?
Well, I would just say that accountability and discipline in an organization are the number one service that management provides its employees. So don't look at it as something where I'm coming down on people. And here's what I would say. Accountability is a dish best served warm, so that people realize that you're doing it for them, that the person who's making the effort or lacking the skill, it's not that we're doing it to punish you, it's we're doing it to help you, right? That ironically, the person who's failing is the reason why we're doing accountability. Number two, I want to make sure the team can hold itself accountable. I don't need the managers to hold accountability. The team should be doing it for each other. And then number three, we got to do it for the client to make sure the client gets world-class service from us. And those are the three reasons why accountability is so important. And that's what I like to leave you with today, is that accountability is a service that's served warm, not cold or indifferent or angry. Never indulge in anger or negativity, because that is just time you're spending that you could have spent getting people back on track in a positive way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Joe, thank you once again to the entire Lion's Den audience. A true legend in our space, Joe Crisara, Service MVP. You can find him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't know if you have a Pinterest account, but I'm sure probably Service MVP does. But we appreciate your time today. It's been great talking to you. I've enjoyed it, and I'm thoroughly honored to have this opportunity to bring to our audience a little bit of Uncle Joe. So thank you so much, my friend. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and had a great Thanksgiving as well.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.